I knew my career at that firm was dead the moment a senior vice president took full credit for my compliance strategy while adjusting his tailored suit like he had just conquered the world. I spent 80 hours that week crafting those legal safeguards in exhausted haze, balancing full-time work with late-night business law courses. Yet there he stood, accepting applause from executive board members who treated federal regulations like optional suggestions. I was the invisible backbone of that company, expected to fix every mistake without ever making a sound. For months, I endured the soul-crushing routine of being the essential employee nobody wanted to acknowledge. Whenever executive leadership wanted to skip mandatory risk protocols to boost short-term metrics, I was the one who had to step in and say no. They viewed me as a buzzkill rather than a shield protecting them from devastating federal fines. I eventually stopped expecting appreciation and quietly began working on my exit plan. Every evening after my shift, I dragged my tired body to a quiet diner, opened my laptop, and slowly built my path toward an advanced degree. The corporate circus reached a whole new level when the vice president brought his wife into the firm as the new head of culture. She wore expensive pastel suits, organized mandatory team-building exercises, and questioned whether strict legal compliance aligned with our corporate emotional energy. I refused to play along with her performance, which quickly made me her favorite target. While everyone else clapped for her nonsensical ideas, I spent my nights fixing massive regulatory errors caused by her husband cutting corners to make routine documentation sound friendlier. I kept my head down, answered frantic late-night emails, and single-handedly managed complex audit preparations while executives took all the credit. They assumed I was completely passive because I stopped arguing with them in staff meetings. In reality, I was simply gathering my thoughts and documenting every single decision. Compliance is not about who speaks the loudest in a boardroom. It comes down to timestamps, authorized signatures, and an unbreakable paper trail. I possessed every single piece of evidence, and they had no idea I was ready to use it. The final straw came during an insufferable company networking event at a downtown luxury hotel courtyard. Surrounded by string lights and catering trays, the vice president's wife cornered me in front of several board members. In a loudly patronizing voice, she mocked my decision to pursue higher education, calling it a quaint side project that distracted from my dedication to the company. The surrounding managers let out awkward, polite chuckles to stay on her good side. I did not lose my temper, but simply took a sip of my drink and smiled. 4 hours later, Human Resources summoned me into a private office to deliver a carefully rehearsed speech about cultural divergence. The representative nervously explained that while my work quality was excellent, my serious attitude no longer matched their upbeat corporate environment. They offered me a quiet severance package, assuming I would accept the gentle exit and vanish. I calmly asked who would take over my duties as Chief Compliance Officer. She casually mentioned that internal legal staff would delegate the workload, while the vice president's wife focused on aligning company values. They handed me a standard departure agreement that contained legal clauses I had personally drafted years prior. I politely thanked the Human Resources representative, gathered my coat, and walked out without signing a single page. What none of them realized was that removing an official compliance officer requires immediate regulatory disclosure with federal authorities. Until those formal documents are officially updated, the last registered officer remains legally attached to the institution. I walked out of that building knowing they were stepping straight into a massive regulatory trap. The next morning, I returned to the office for the absolute last time with complete composure. I logged into my computer, backed up a few personal files, and ignored dozens of urgent emails from internal attorneys asking for guidance. Instead of solving their problems, I drafted a concise resignation letter addressed directly to executive leadership. I explicitly stated my immediate departure and reminded them to update all federal filings immediately. I dropped my keycard on the reception desk, handed over my laptop, and walked out into the cool morning air. Predictably, the executive team completely ignored my written warning regarding the official filing updates. Screenshots sent from a former colleague revealed that the vice president immediately passed compliance duties to his wife, dismissing regulatory rules as simple administrative tasks. They assumed compliance was just another title they could reassign without consequences. Meanwhile, I sat at a local coffee shop, casually sipping tea while finalizing the outline for my graduate capstone project on corporate negligence and institutional risk. Within 48 hours, the situation inside the firm began to rapidly deteriorate. The legal team panicked after realizing that operating without a registered compliance chief violated fundamental financial regulations. Junior staff members tried to raise red flags, but executive leadership shut down every conversation to protect their public image. The vice president's wife responded by sending a company-wide email featuring motivational quotes about team spirit. It was a masterclass in executive delusion, and I watched the entire slow-motion disaster unfold from a safe distance. The ultimate catalyst arrived when a federal auditor from the Securities and Exchange Commission sent a polite email to my personal address. He mentioned plans to conduct a routine compliance check at the firm the following morning and hoped to meet with me directly. I responded instantly with surgical precision, informing him that I had resigned earlier that week and suggesting he contact internal legal counsel. I then forwarded the entire exchange to my personal attorney and sat back to watch the inevitable outcome. The following morning, federal officials walked into the corporate lobby demanding to review active regulatory filings with the chief compliance officer. The receptionist nervously admitted I was not present, leading to absolute panic throughout the legal department. Executives scrambled through conference rooms, unable to produce any documentation proving a legitimate successor had been appointed. To make matters worse, someone had stupidly submitted a fresh financial update using my old credentials hours after I walked out, creating a massive legal nightmare for the entire executive board. By early afternoon, financial news outlets published reports confirming a major federal inquiry into the firm for regulatory reporting violations. My phone lit up with frantic messages from former colleagues and media reporters seeking comments, but I remained completely silent. I took the public headline and placed it directly at the beginning of my capstone paper as a real-world case study. The executives had built a fragile house of cards out of arrogance and vanity, and it was finally collapsing under the weight of its own incompetence. Panicked board members quickly instructed their legal team to send my attorney a high-paying offer for a temporary consulting contract. They desperately needed me to return, fix their paperwork, and take the blame before federal fines ruined the firm. My attorney issued a single-paragraph refusal, stating clearly that I had no interest in resolving their mistakes. Simultaneously, I submitted a comprehensive folder of archived emails and time-stamped records to federal regulators through official whistleblower channels, ensuring the complete truth would be exposed through proper legal avenues. The final public blow landed during a quarterly earnings call that was supposed to reassure nervous investors. An independent financial analyst directly confronted the chief executive officer about the ongoing federal investigation and unauthorized regulatory submissions. The chief executive stumbled over his words, offered vague excuses about internal transitions, and accidentally confirmed the inquiry on a live broadcast. Within hours, company stock plunged. Key clients demanded immediate account withdrawals, and the vice president's wife was quietly removed from her newly invented corporate role. Justice in the corporate world rarely comes from emotional arguments or loud confrontations in hallway meetings. True accountability arrives through meticulous documentation, quiet patience, and the courage to walk away when toxic people demand your silence. I eventually presented my finished capstone project to a room full of rising industry leaders, using my former employer as the ultimate lesson in leadership failure. They thought they could erase my contributions, but in the end, my silence was the very thing that brought their entire empire down.